And welcome inside the Backstage Pass. It is show number 2 today. And of course, a special one for a big show coming up this week, a live show with live music back and doing its thing out there this Friday, November 11th at Pedrati's Ranch in San Antonio, Texas, a place I know very well because I got married there about 10, 11, 12 years ago. Enjoyed it very much. Great outdoor, indoor venue. And Merlene Cox is the best at Full Circle Moments out there, one of our partners here on the Backstage Pass. As we're presented by Bangtail Whiskey, you guys can get tickets at Full Circle Moments LLC.com for the big show coming up this week, Veterans Day show with the great Darryl Worley and our guest here today, of course, Bernie Nelson, one of the best songwriters, singers out there in Nashville, Tennessee. Bernie, how you doing?
Man, I'm loving it. It's I look back on 40 plus years in the music business, and I feel like Kyle Petty and like when did all that happen? I mean, people like, and you won this and you won this. You're like, when? It's been so long, and I mean, the accolades from the 90s I'm proud of them and stuff, but I'm in Texas now, and Texas has been amazing to me. I've had a lot of number ones with Texas artists that I didn't even know who they were 3 years ago. So very cool.
Well, I know you guys are excited to get together. I mean, Darryl, definitely has been on the show before here with me, and we've talked a lot about the great hits he had and how he was a huge part, just like yourself, in that great songwriting, the great era of the 1990s. And I always say, sometimes people say often imitated but not duplicated, because I don't think we'll ever see a duplication of what transpired in the greatest music era, at least for me in my childhood growing up there, for the great bands and stuff like that. Just had Porter Howell here on the program from the great band Little Texas. What do you remember best about that era? Because it seems like, it's like one person would put out a great song, Bernie, then a band would follow, then a solo artist and another band. And it was like, man, some of the best songwriters during that era, yourself included, just made it happen.
It was a different time. I mean, you had more access, and my biggest cuts came about by just keeping my nose pressed up against the window, and I wrote for a major publishing company, and I would know that Randy Travis was coming in or Martina McBride was coming in, and I'd have a cassette made, and I'd just sit there and wait. I'd hear the music stop, start, stop, start, stop, and finally they'd stick their head out and say, "What do you got?" And I'd hand them a cassette, and bing, 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 I'd get a cut. Or just, it was different back then because we would hang out at the Longhorn with George Strait and with Montgomery Gentry, with, Vern Gosdin. And it was just a crazy time,
Yeah, and that's what made that era so special, because you said you never knew who was coming around the corner. But I know for yourself included, man, the songs there with Country's Best, you mentioned one of my favorites, Rodney Crowell, Guy Clark, and just so many things that were out there that you guys got to do back then and grace those stages. A guy like Darryl, how excited about are you to play this show coming up this week at Pedrati's Ranch? It's going to be a lot of fun. And I mean, Darryl brings it. I know you do too.
Anytime I get around DW is fun. I mean, anybody who doesn't have fun with Darryl Worley on or off stage is a stick in the mud, because Darryl is just one of the greatest human beings there is. And he enjoys life, and he enjoys entertaining. And I've always been a big fan of his, even before he had a record deal. We would write songs and hang out, and I just believed in him. I could write a whole book on people I didn't believe in that I thought were really talented, but I didn't see them becoming household names. People like Kenny and Blake and some guy named Garth. And, we would write, and then I'd blow off a writing appointment so I could go to the gym and go, well, it's just Kenny or it's just Garth, and even after Garth took off, I thought, this is going to last a couple records. He'll sell 15 million records or something, then it'll fizzle out. But there's this thing called believing in yourself, and those guys really believed that they were going to be superstars, not just recording artists, and that's the difference. And they worked hard to get where they are. And Darryl, same deal. He's a great pursuer of great songs and still is.
Yeah, no doubt. It's timeless classics too that live on too, and it's all about, I would say, in this industry. The CMA Awards are coming up tomorrow night, and there's so many cool things that happen on that show too. It's good to see our Texas boy, Cody Johnson, up for all those different categories out there. But I always say this: where there's a great song and have somebody to sing it, it's also important, like yourself, for someone with the accolades you have too, being a great songwriter, being able to put those lyrics on a piece of paper and give them to somebody or get into a co-write. you know, and I still say it today. It was that era again was defined by yourself, Bernie, and the great songwriters of the 1990s, early 2000s.
You know, you have to look at Eric Pasley. 5 weeks at #1 with She Had Me at Heads, Carolina, and written by Rhett Akins and Tim Nichols and the writers of there goes my brain, the writers of Heads, Carolina, you know, Sanders, and the 90s country sound is I think, I hate to say that people are starving for it, but when I talk to Spotify people and stuff, they tell me that 60% of what people are streaming are from 2000 back.
Yeah.
You know, and then like Till You Can't was written 8 years prior to Cody recording it by a kid who was around towards the end of the 90s, but really got signed in the early 2000s, Matt Rogers. And I told him, I said, man, you built an airplane in the basement, and there wasn't any need for airplanes for like 6 years. And there was a fog, and you couldn't fly an airplane in the fog. And when the fog lifted, everybody wanted an airplane. And you had an airplane. And that's what happened. And thanks to guys like Stapleton and John Party and Jamie Johnson and Cody Jinks for plowing down the walls of the hip hop bro country. What normally is a 5-year cycle became a 12-year run, and it record sales diminished, and not just because of digital marketing, but I mean, it was just copy and paste songwriting back then. So I think you're going to start seeing a lot better songs coming out of these guys like the Country On and stuff like that. And I'm anxious to see where the next big artist comes out of it and that whole sound.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, you know, one of the hottest guys there now too. Do you keep track of kind of the Luke Combs? Because it just seems like everything that guy touches, whether it be just the writers he works with or the recording process, that guy's done everything you can do. Of course, he paid his dues, no doubt, but congratulations to his success and the great songs that he's come out with too, Bernie.
Yeah, and I think my favorite new guy is that Cameron Marlowe. I mean,
oh yeah,
he blew me away with a song I heard the other day and about him and her, and it just was so well written. And to me, having a well written song and delivered by an artist, a singer sings a song, an artist interprets it, and there's the difference. And there's some great artists out there, and I think that Hubbard, for example, I think he's going to become a great country writer without Florida Georgia line. And people knock Luke Bryant, but he's about as country as you get. I mean, this man would rather sit in a deer blind with his boys than play in front of 40,000 people. And a lot of people probably don't know, but his producer is Jeff Stevens, who wrote Carrying Your Love and I Get Carried Away.
Yeah.
You know, so there's country all over the charts right now. And I think this year's radio seminar is going to be really interesting to see how they're going to try to pick up what they don't have and get on board. Because I don't think that bro country is going to spin any further than it already has. So,
you know, you stepped on some biggest stages out there, and one of my favorite spots. I didn't get to see a show there, but we passed right by it. We were there for the CRS this past year. We're going back hopefully in 23. Your favorite there, that Bluebird, man, is always special to grace that stage. Give me some of your best memories of that Bluebird Cafe.
You know, gosh, I mean, some of my favorites would be, I would play the Bluebird with Bill Lloyd from Foster and Lloyd, and John and Billy Prine would come in. And John would come up to me and say, "Hey, man, would you mind if me and Billy jammed after your set?" And it just blew me away. And in the early days, it was me and Steve Earle playing there and playing the Sutler. And I remember one night Steve and I had a gig, and he asked me if a friend of his could sit in and play my guitar. And it was the first time Lyle Lovett played Nashville. But the Bluebird, in the day, it was where you went to get a record deal. It's where Garth got his record deal. He had played the Bluebird before, but after he and Camp Blasey wrote If Tomorrow Never Comes, Bob Doyle convinced the powers that be at Capitol to come back in and listen to him. Lynn Schultz and there goes my brain. Terry Choate, who just passed a few months ago, came back in, heard If Tomorrow Never Comes, and they got it. And they signed Garth to a 1-record deal, and 19 million records later, they re-signed him. So the Bluebird, there's so many great stories behind. I've been in there when Michael McDonald and Mike Reed would swap songs facing each other on piano and have Bonnie Raitt sit in. And I did a lot of shows with the late, great Russell Smith from The Amazing Rhythm Aces, and Red Lane, Miss Emily's Picture, and my godfather, Wayne Carson, who wrote You're Always on My Mind and Give Me a Ticket for an Airplane, the letter. And I would just sit there in the round and be in awe of actually being next to these guys, let alone having them write with me and do shows with me. And I think the new writers, I don't think they have as much connection to the past as the 90s writers did. They seem to feel like that type of writing isn't necessary. But I get phone calls lately from guys who have been getting Brantley Gilbert cuts and Jason Aldean cuts and Luke Combs cuts. And they're like, can we virtual writer? Can you come to Nashville and write? And I'm like, that tells me that country music has spun pretty hard that you're calling Bernie Nelson to write a song, because I don't play the hip hop game, and they know that.
Yeah, we know that, no doubt. And hey, one of the best ones ever put out there. Had to ask you about. Congratulations on that million airplay status with Daddy Never Was, the Cadillac Kind. Of course, Confederate Railroad out there too. And man, just great writing. Put it that way too. And man, just a song that I know when you probably put it out, and I'm sure Confederate Railroad did too. They're like, man, we got something special in our hands here, right?
It was. Danny Shirley, the lead singer, we were in the studio the day they recorded it, and Danny was hesitant on it, but the late, great Barry Beckett, who produced Kodachrome and Old Time Rock and Roll, he told Danny that he really believed in the song, and let's cut the track, and if you don't like it, we won't go back to it. And we were there when they cut the track, and Danny came out, took a puff off his cigarette, and said, wow, something just happened. And we walked out of there feeling the magic, and 30 some years later, I go somewhere and have 20-year-old kids come up to me and tell me that they play that in their show. And Danny and I have repeated stories about how many times people have come up and told us how it was played at their father's or grandfather's service. And it's a real special song. And Dave Gibson and I wrote that. And then we went on to write House on Old Lonesome Road for Conway together. And it just, the magic was there that night that we wrote it. And years later, it seems to still work.
Yeah, and of course, and it's going to be a big show coming up this week again. Friday night, Veterans Day show there. Pedrati's Ranch in San Antonio, Texas. The great Bernie Nelson and, of course, Darryl Worley. Get tickets now, Full Circle Moments, LLC.com with our good friend Merlene Cox. And we're going to come back and dive into some Ghost and Angels, an album that Bernie released this past February. Talk about that and some of my favorite songs off of there, including one of my favorites there has to be Somebody's Praying and 69 Hummingbird. Coming back here on the Backstage Pass, more with Bernie. Time out for Bangtail Whiskey. If you want that holiday drink, make sure you do that with Bangtail Whiskey around the tree or with your favorite meal. Get it at easyliquor.com right now, too, to get that glass. And, of course, put it with all the pastries and desserts. It's also good with that, too. Trust me, I've had my fair share with the last 2 years that Bangtail's been with me. Hang tight. More with Bernie here. It is the Backstage Pass live on the YouTube channel and, of course, at the Sports Guys podcast.com. More to come here.
The Bangtail pour is comprised of a sweet corn mash base. The front has a subtle sweetness and not too sharp. It has notes of a medium char or white oak for a smoky flavor in the middle, and the tail has a super smooth and warm finish.
Go behind the scenes with some of the biggest artists in music today with the Backstage Pass, powered by the SportsGuysPodcast.com. Join Brandon Morrill and his co-host Kirsty Krause as they talk to rising stars and legends about their music careers. Listen to their latest tracks and learn fun facts about the men and women behind the music you love. And be sure to tune into the Backstage Pass Monday through Friday from 3:30 to 6:30, powered by the SportsGuysPodcast.com. And welcome into the Backstage Pass. And, of course, coming up here tomorrow on the show, Madeline Merlot is going to join us here on the Backstage Pass. We'll talk about her new EP called Slide. And next week, American Idol winner Noah Thompson here on the show. Looking forward to those conversations back here with the great Bernie Nelson here. And I got to talk to you a little bit about Ghost and Angels. You guys have put that out in February of this year. And I'm going to start with 69 Hummingbird. Where there's a great song comes a great story, right?
Yeah. I was playing Douglas Corner one night. To my left was Jimmy Stewart, who wrote Little Less Talk, Lot More Action and Brotherly Love for Keith Whitley and Earl Thomas Conley and Mo Bandy. To my right was a guy named Tony Arata that wrote a little song called The Dance. And across me, a gentleman was playing these new songs of his that just, I didn't think they were all that great. And I had a Conway Twitty song in the top of the chart, and I was feeling pretty arrogant. So in my mind, I'm thinking, why is this guy with us? I mean, who let him in the house? When this guy named George said, well, my new songs aren't that great, but here's a song I wrote years ago for a band I was with. And George played a song called Fire on the Mountain from Marshall Tucker. And I went up to George after the show and told him what a suck ass I was and how my ego was completely out of control and what a big fan I was of him with Marshall Tucker. And backtrack 1977, Marshall Tucker had offered me a publishing deal and offered to tour with them and open for them before I ended up going to Muscle Shoals. So George and I became really great friends. And I asked him one time, I said, when you and Toy wrote, I know you have a guild, but what did you guys write on mostly, electric guitars or what? And he said that Toy Caldwell had a 69 Hummingbird. So that stuck in my head. And I took 7 years out of the music business and was a deputy sheriff in Nashville, Tennessee. And I met a lot of people through booking that I would send through there that came to Nashville to be country music people, and they fell on the wrong side of the tracks. And they didn't make it there, but they at least put their foot in the water, and I give them kudos for that. At least they showed up. So 69 Hummingbird came from George McCorkle, who was one of the greatest people I'll ever know, and Toy Caldwell 69 Hummingbird guitar. And for all those people like Ships That Don't Come In with Dave Gibson that just didn't see their dreams come true. So it was about that. And it's a really special song to me, and I'm glad it made this record.
Yeah, again, Ghost and Angels out there nationwide. Make sure you guys go check it out. I thought you guys laid it off very well too, Bernie, with Somebody's Praying. And man, that's just hit the nail on the head with that one too.
Yeah, I sold my house in Nashville on June the 4th, closed on the 5th, but the 4th I rolled out of Nashville at like 7 a.m. with a U-Haul trailer on the back of my Ram. And somewhere outside of Little Rock, it was just getting dark, and I didn't have any room in the truck for anybody or anything. And I saw two guys walking down the road, and I said, I'll bet they're praying. And I wrote most of the song on the drive. I drove all the way to Fredericksburg that night. And so many pieces of that song, I think, touched somebody in some way. And I've never had a song get as many people call me, just flat out call me, Richie McDonald from Lone Star, and say, good grief, what a song. And Reba's people. And just, it's been a real special song. So I really wanted to put it up front on the record so that my faith wasn't buried in the back of the record somewhere. And I hope that it finds a place with people. And all my records have some element of shock and awe that make you go, wow. And then I've got to have a silly fun song in there. And we accomplished that on this record with You Can't Fight Naked. So
I was going to get to that one too, which is a great title, no doubt. But before that one too, I thought was the fifth song on that record, Half a Mind to Leave. Let's dive into that one a little bit.
Same guy that I wrote You Can't Fight Naked with. I do a thing called Weekend at Bernie's, and it's a chance for people to write with me and come spend a weekend at the house, and they pay me enough to where I don't have to be on the road for the weekend. And I've made some incredible friendships out of that. This particular Weekend at Bernie's, this gentleman lived in outside of Pensacola, Navarre Beach. And he said, man, next time you come down here, could we do it at my house? And I did. And being a songwriter, you hear stuff all the time, go, ooh, that sounds like a great idea for a song. But I got up around 9:30, and he's an early riser. And he said, man, I got to make a fresh pot of coffee because all I got left is enough for a quarter cup of coffee. And as soon as he said that, I ran and grabbed a guitar, and it just fell out. And people tell me that there's a line there about the wall still smells like whiskey, where she let that bottle fly. And it's about a guy who promised his girlfriend wife he wouldn't drink anymore, come home drunk, and he did. And so the next morning he's paying for it, and she's going to finish his coffee, and she's either going to leave or she's not. And people say, man, that line about that whiskey bottle against the wall, I said, you can't write them if you didn't live it. And I went through that one night, and You know, it's just life is a great palette to draw paint from. That's the best way I can explain it.
Great way to put that, no doubt, too. And again, the big show's coming up this week on Friday night, Veterans Day, Pedrati's Ranch, San Antonio, Texas, with the great Bernie Nelson and, of course, the great Darryl Worley. Out there, get your tickets. I went to a show there just a few weeks back and saw Chris Cagle and Andy Griggs. And, man, you can't do it better. Marlene Cox does some great shows out there with Full Circle Moments, LLC.com. Make sure you guys go grab some tickets out there. We had a good turnout last time, hoping for an even better turnout this time. All right, so you can't fight naked. Let's get the lowdown there.
That was my buddy Mike Smith. He said that was the advice his father gave him when he got married. And I thought, no, I don't want to write that. It just no. And then it just had that Bobby Bear feel about it, you know, about that mentality of, you know, if you get mad at each other, man, just peel your clothes off, and pretty soon you forget what you were angry about. It doesn't take long till you totally forget why you were yelling at each other. And even if you do want to yell at each other when you're naked, it takes the edge off of it, I think. But that album's been great. I've had a few cuts off that album go places. And I'm not sure if you know, but the Whiskey and Water record that we put out a few years back just got that title track just got recorded by Willie Nelson and some guy named John Daly, the golfer. And I'll take a Willie Nelson cut any way I can get it. And it was an amazing cut. And having Willie sing one of my songs is awesome. It's been one of those 2-year crazy spins where I've had 5 number ones in Texas in 18 months. And it's just been, you know, like I said earlier, people I didn't even know I'm riding with and friends with. I didn't know who Corey Morrow was or Kyle Park was. And you know, had a number one with Kyle last year, and this new group that I brought to Texas, Kinfo, they've been great to me. And just, it's, you can't sneeze at the Texas radio chart. That's a tough business out there. And I think I had 4 songs in the top 25 last year for a spin count. And that's, you know, I don't take that lightly. And it's not about the paycheck. It's about having some young artists want to sing my songs. And at this stage of my career, that's really special to me.
Y'all also had a good one too, Bernie, from that record, Whiskey and Water too. I loved, which was Jesse and her Outlaw. Let's talk about that one too, because I like the fact that you could really just have a little fun with it, and definitely just another great country song out there.
That was my first single to radio in Texas, and because I didn't live in Texas, I think I butted upstream with some people, but some of the bigger radio stations reached out to me and told me how special the song was. I was watching a video of Storms Never Last, and it's the coolest video. If you ever watch it, they just have a camera above Jesse and Waylon, and they're sitting in the studio and they're singing with the musicians around them. And there's this connection between Jesse and Waylon in that video that can't be denied. And it has that Kennedy and Monroe thing about it. It has that, you know, Hepburn, and it just has that connection where you see that they're just absolutely crazy about each other. And so the funny thing about that song, the first 2 verses just fell right out. But I learned quickly that there's very few things that really are worth saying that rhyme with law. And it literally took me about 3 trips back and forth from Texas to Nashville to finally have the right word fall into place without it being a forced line and a line that mattered. And one of the things I teach in my songwriting classes is if you just come up with a line just to make it rhyme, then you wasted a perfectly good opportunity to say something special. So songs are just conversation put to music, and the best ones always are. Upstairs in that little back bedroom was where I did my homework and I learned to play guitar. That's just conversation. Yet there's not any little girl out there in Texas that doesn't know exactly what Miranda Lambert was talking about.
Yeah, no doubt about it too. And I know you've had some great cuts there, even with one of my favorites too, Tracy Lawrence out there too. At the same time, just good collaborations with that guy. He knows Texas very well too. Give me some of the best memories working with Tracy. I know one was the Ride, I believe, was one, and was trying to think of the title real quick. Heaven for a while.
Heaven for a while. We were at a retreat in Gatlinburg, and Rick Huckabee was with us. Rick wrote Beer with Jesus, and he and I wrote a song called Roll That Way, When You Roll That Way, that just went #1 with my buddy Case Harden. He recorded it, took it #1. But the last day of writing, Tracy got up, and I could tell you some funny stories about the whole weekend, but it would involve illegal drugs and a lot of Bud Light that a lot of those guys took part of. And I don't drink Bud Light, and I don't smoke dope, so it all worked out really good. But Tracy got up in the morning, and Flip Anderson was with us, his road manager, and said, "We're going to write a song called Heaven for a While. It's about a guy had a chick, and they parted ways, but he held heaven for a while." And he said, "I'm going to go out and smoke a cigarette and get it started." And I said, "Hey, I was up all last night with a new friend of mine on Facebook who worked at St. Jude's and told me the ratio of losing children, it was a lot higher than I even knew about." And he looked at me and goes, "Nelson, we are not writing one of them MF touchy-feely songs today." And I said, "Okay, man." And he said, "No, forget it. Screw you. We're not doing it." And he walked outside, came back in. He said, "You son of a," he said, "the opening line is," and he threw the opening line out. And I think to this day, he has a hard time getting through that one, because it's the loss of a child is unthinkable and unbearable. And that's what the song was about. And it's one of my favorite cuts. And I really love Tracy for going the distance on that song. He's a great writer. I mean, Front Porch Looking In, or if the world was a front porch, that's Tracy Lawrence. And I've sat in the room, and people think that these artists aren't great writers. Tracy Lawrence, Pam Tillis, Trace Atkins, they kick my butt every time we get together. And they are great writers.
They are. So they come up with some of the best songs that, like you said, live on for even now. These days, you still hear on radio. And of course, that's when you're good at something. Hey, it definitely shines, and it shows out there too. All right, I'm gonna have a little fun with you too, because I know you guys are gonna have fun at this show. Wish I could be there this Friday night, but I got to be at this little thing called Bryan College Station and go out there and do some high school football playoff stuff. That's why I do sports and music. Hard job, but you got to go get a paycheck. That's just part of it too. But
get her done.
Get her done. That's it. Which is football playing this weekend with the high school playoffs starting, especially here in Texas. You know how big high school football is. But you see the hat too, and I know, were you following this Astros run, Bernie, to the World Series?
I was. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't have a TV in my house. I'm just outgrown TV altogether. But I do have a cell phone, and I would keep up with it. And the first game was a heartbreaker. And I thought that was one in the bag. We were just going to roll from there. And then I woke up the next morning and went, what the heck happened? And then the no-hitter. And it just was and I'm a big fan of Verlander and the whole team. They're just a bunch of scrappers. And kudos to Dusty after all these years to get that. So, yeah, it was a real special moment.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go out the other night. And of course, one of my buddies said, "Nope, get in the academy, get in the line. It's like Black Friday all over again. Go experience it. You're only like 2 minutes from your house." And I said, "Okay, cool. Let's go drop some money that, whatever. It's cool. Get the merchandise, T-shirts, ball caps, a flag. And before I walk out of there, I'm sure everybody's done it before when they splurged. You're 250, 300 in the hole. And it's like, well, yeah, it's only a one-time thing,
Yeah. So is Stephenville going to be in College Station?
No, I'm actually going to go see a team called Lindale. It's a Miranda Lambert's way, Lindale, Texas, the Lindale Eagles. And my Vider Pirates down here, the Vider Pirates, are playing a little Wishbone Slot T Mafia. They're going to play at Bryan High School this week.
You know who else is from Lindale, Greenville? My buddy Colin Ray.
Just saw him out at the big old, probably a festival you've heard of in Winnie, Texas, down here. The Winnie Rice Festival has been going on for a long time in Winnie, Texas, down there. So he played. He played down there this year.
I met Colin at EMI. I walked in one day, and he and his manager were sitting on a couch. I introduced myself. They said they were there to hear songs, and they didn't have a meeting. Nobody would give them a meeting. And Colin's name is Bubba Ray. So we got in my Jeep, and we drove around the outside of Nashville out in the country and listened to songs in my Jeep with the top off. And Colin took a cassette, and Steve, his manager, took a cassette. And they decided they want to cut this song of mine called Any Old Stretch of Blacktop. And then Shenandoah recorded it and called me. Rick Hall and McAnally called me the night they recorded, said it was the first single off the second album. And then it didn't make the album because Rick Hall and Shenandoah got in a fight over something or another to do with the song. And so I called my co-writer, and I said, hey, remember that kid Bubba Ray was going to cut our song? And he said, well, he did. And I said, well, when's the record coming out? And he said, well, Bernie, the record's out. And I said, well, is it doing anything? He said, it's double platinum. I said, well, it's had any hits? He said, 2 singles. I said, Bubba Ray's had 2 singles, went double platinum. How come I never heard of them? And they said, well, Bernie, Bubba changed his name to Colin. And in that day, it would be like being on a Luke Combs record, not knowing you were on it. Mm-hmm. And I'd been to every second #1 party for Gerald Smith and Love Me with my buddy Skip Ewing. I'd been to his #1 party, and I did not know I was on the record.
That's great.
Hysterical.
That's terrible.
And then Shenandoah was kind enough to put it on their greatest hits album. So that song has been on Colin Ray's greatest hits album and on Shenandoah's greatest hits record. But neither one of them singled it. But just the same, I'm tickled to have it where anytime one of my buddies would cut one of my songs. And I look back and I think the coolest thing for me, the Willie Nelson cut ended up getting on a Rodney Crowell record this last year during COVID. And I ran into Rodney Crowell out here in Kerrville, and he told me, he said, Bernie, we thought Willie wrote that song, so we didn't pursue the writers, and we found out that you had written the song. He said, we really thought Willie wrote it. And I said, Rodney, I can go to my grave thinking that you thought that Willie Nelson wrote one of my songs. I said, I'm good. So it's you never know. And Rodney's obviously one of my teachers, and he has just gotten better and better and better. I saw Radney Foster the other night. We got to catch up, and these guys are melody monsters and just killer writers. And I learn from these guys every day. And I think Houston has put out way too many talented artist writers. I'm sorry, they need to just stop. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
a lot of talent.
It's and even like you said, even in Texas here, it just keeps coming. Another guy I got a chance to see live at a show the other night. You probably have some ties here and there. This great album he put out, a guy named Wade Bowen. He's been doing it for over 20 years in Texas country. I love his sound. He's another one of those guys. It's a trooper. He's been around like Kyle Park, and just amazing how much talent Texas has, Bernie, compared to the rest of everything nationwide. It's crazy.
I mentioned Jim Collins. He's from Nacogdoches. Finley, what's his name? That was on The Voice or American Idol. Dave Finley.
Dave Finley, yeah.
He's from Nacogdoches. My buddy Terry Jo Box, she's from Nacogdoches. She just got 3 songs on the Lanny Wilson record, and she wrote that song Bible in a 44 with Ashley McBride. Just way too much talent. But I was around so much Texas talent. Alan Shanlin, of course, was my closest friend, still is. But Leroy Parnell, Rodney Crowell, Radney, Steve Earle, and of course Guy Clark and I were really good drinking buddies. And you would sit there and the poetic part of songwriting would override my desire to get a cut a lot of times, because I didn't want to do a show with a song I had on the radio and have Guy Clark sit next to me and have it be some fluffy song, and have Guy just look at you like, yeah, I bet you cashed the check, didn't you? And so my greatest acclamation ever came from Guy Clark in a restroom at RCA Records. I played a song, I know it's on one of the records, called Slow Train Home. And Guy asked me who I wrote it with. I told him I wrote it by myself, and he said, in case no one ever tells you, you're a songwriter. And to me, that's a check you don't cash, and it's a plaque you can't put on the wall. But it solidified me to the point of believing in myself, probably when I needed it most.
No doubt. And I tell you what, I wish I could be there, man. You and I could just have a beer over it this Friday night, and I just sit there at the table and just sit here and talk music with you all night long, and I love it. And it's going to be a great show, guys. If you haven't got tickets, make sure you do out there. Full Circle Moments LLC.com, the big Veterans Day show with, of course, the great Bernie Nelson and Darryl Worley this week out there at Pedrati's Ranch in San Antonio, Texas, Friday, November 11th.
Tell them how great Pedrati's is. That place is amazing.
It's fantastic. I got married there, like I said, about 12 years ago, and we just saw Chris Cagle and Andy play a show there, Andy Griggs, and of course the Nick Lawrence band. And I tell you, man, we sat right there at the table we had reserved, and The silent auction is amazing out there. Make sure you go bid on those things out there. This is a great venue. And, of course, Full Circle Moment T-shirts are going to be available there. So, as I always say, man, when it comes down to it, embrace the concert, embrace live music, because there's nothing like it again after the hell we went through in this nation, Bernie, to the last 2 or 3 years, and the live shows were canceled. I missed it a lot, and I'm just so glad to be back out there again doing what I do here on the radio, doing it. So
we have a ball. I've got an upright bass player named John Whitley. We call him Smiling John. And there's sometimes in the show you're in that sweet spot. And I look over at John, and he's just grinning from ear to ear because he knows we've got it. And it's just a neat feel. We've got a simple little show with a steel guitar and acoustic lead and upright bass and myself. And man, we have a lot of fun. And we do a lot of new stuff. The new album will come out next year. We're doing some stuff off it. And, you know, live music is my barometer, how I know that it still works. That what I just wrote is good enough to maybe put out there and stuff. And these new kids are cutting it. I think if I could throw a dart and pick somebody, I think it would be Jake Bush. I think he's going to be a really big artist. He's one of my favorite singers out there. Him and Jesse Robb Jr., both are beasts out there, and we've written some stuff together. And there's country music is alive and well, not just in Texas, but all over. And people are starving, and that's why Stapleton was such a big winner, if you will. And Cody Johnson's such a big winner because people were burnt out with disco music and disco country music. And, you know, I met some writers who had number ones in 2018, 2017. And I told them, I said, man, I'm sorry, but I've never heard your song. And here's a test. 5 years from now, walk into a bar and play it and see if they remember it, you know. Or you walk into a bar and be Randy Boudreaux and sing Alibis. I promise you they know the words to Alibis.
Well, and that's the thing about it is that good music, like you said, too, is going to live on, and it's great songs that you've done and all the contributions you've made to country music. It's all about the songwriter. I'm not afraid to say that here on my show because it is all about the songwriter to make a great song and have somebody to go record it, too. So make sure you guys go out there. Fantastic venue, Friday night, Veterans Day, November 11th, Pedrati's Ranch, Darryl Worley, Bernie Nelson. I'm sure the show is probably about 6, 7 o'clock on there, too. Take advantage of the silent auction. And definitely just salute all our veterans for the sacrifices they've made to the country.
Yeah, buy a veteran a ticket, bring them out to the show, and we'll honor them. I promise you, we'll introduce them and we'll honor them at the show because we really love our veterans.
No doubt, too. And Full Circle Moments, LLC.com. The great Merlene Cox does a great job out there, so where you can buy those tickets and go support our veterans. And definitely appreciate that. I know Darryl couldn't join us today to do some other obligations he had to take care of. But Bernie, you're a class act, my friend. And hey, as soon as the new music comes out in 2023, feel free to come back here on this very platform. And man, we'll talk some more music and good luck at the show on Friday night.
I'm guessing Darryl's on a Kubota someplace. If I had to throw a while, I'm guessing he's on a Kubota someplace. But we'll see him.
I did text him and I didn't get a response. So I know he probably had something else coming up.
Well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate Brandon and love your show and love what you do. And thanks for supporting live music. And it matters to me.
You got it, brother. Like I said, the great Bernie Nelson, Ghost and Angels, is out there across all the digital platforms. Make sure you guys go check it out. And we'll see you guys out there at the show this Friday night at Pedrati's Ranch. Tomorrow on the show, she's hot right now. She's got an EP called Slide. Madeline Merlot is going to join us here on the Backstage Pass next week. Noah Thompson will talk to you guys tomorrow about 4:30 here on the show. Until then, have a great night.